Great, well, welcome. It is so good to see you all, and we're bummed that we couldn't be together in person this evening, but I think for everyone's safety and peace of mind, it's best that we stick to the virtual world, at least for a little bit, until we have more and better information. So thank you all for showing up and bearing with us and continuing to be part of the community. We've got a great lineup tonight. We're really excited. A couple of announcements. What do we have going on? We're gonna have, I'm like, what are they? We have a couple new podcast episodes that will be dropping in September, so be on the lookout for those. Author's Corner campaign is still in full swing. This month's spotlight author, Zak Salih, is here with us and going to be reading this evening. And you can find his books at Potter's House for sale, and lots of great content on the innerlooplit.org/authors corner, interview, podcast, guest post on Washington Independent Review of Books, all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out, as well as our June and July spotlights. What else? Rachel's throwing stuff in the chat for me while I think out loud.
Summer residency.
That's right. Our summer residency is drawing to a close almost, actually, which is pretty wild. We have our 5th and final resident who will be on site next week at the Woodlawn and Pope Leahy House in Virginia. You can head over to our blog to read about the experiences of the 4 residents who have been there already this summer. As usual, there's been some really kind of surprising and fruitful and beautiful work that they've done. So we're so happy that that partnership is continuing. Moving forward, we are going to be moderating a panel this fall for the Book Festival in October. So be on the lookout for that down the line a little bit. We'll send information out. And I think that's
October. We're also doing a writing retreat.
That's right, but that's full.
But that's full. But I'm cooking up plans for sort of a bigger retreat, possibly in the winter. The retreat we do at the Porches only has 5 rooms, but there's a space in West Virginia, a West Virginia state park that has cabins, and we could do possibly a bigger type retreat. So stay tuned for information on that, and definitely email us if you're interested in the retreat type setting. That way we can gauge interest in how many people would want to join.
For sure.
That would be in the winter. They have indoor fireplaces. It's very nice.
Which, if you're going to bring me to West Virginia in possibly like 5 feet of snow, I'm going to need a fireplace. So
exactly.
And I think the last thing to mention is that our 2nd annual Inner Loop District Fray writing contest winners will be announced at the end of this month, and the winning pieces will be published in the October issue of the magazine.
And it's being judged by poet Jose Padua,
who's an amazing local poet here in the DC area. So yeah, I think we are ready to get this thing started. For those of you who haven't joined one of our virtual events before, or any of our events before, readers have 5 minutes of reading time. We will do a short intermission after our featured reader and the first 3. And during that time, we'll set up breakout rooms for you all to kibitz and commingle as you will, if you would like.
I'm going to say my spiel. So basically, the biggest part of our Inner Loop events is creating community. And normally people are able to chat during intermission and run into each other at the bar. So we try to recreate that atmosphere with breakout rooms during intermission. They're not at all obligatory, but everyone who's participated has come back raving to the main room and talked about how amazing it is just to have those random encounters that we don't get anymore, or haven't had in a while because of the pandemic. And we also encourage everyone to use the chat a lot. One of the biggest things that writers get out of readings is getting instant feedback from the audience. And obviously we don't get that in a virtual setting. So we try to substitute that with lots of commentary in the chat. So the more you can put your reactions in there, if you like a line or something resonates, throw it in, don't be shy. The writers really appreciate that kind of feedback that they would normally get through laughter and applause in a live setting. That's my spiel.
Yeah, so that's how it's gonna go. And I'm going to go ahead and spotlight our featured reader for this evening, who we are so excited to have joining us, Zeina Azzam. So give me just 1 second to remember how to do this. Dan is not here for us this evening to do so. There we go. And let me introduce Zeina to you all. She is a Palestinian American poet, editor, and community activist. She volunteers for organizations that advocate for human rights and civil rights of Palestinians and of vulnerable communities in Alexandria, Virginia, where she lives. Zeina also serves as a mentor for We Are Not Numbers, a writing program for youth in Gaza. Her chapbook, Beina, am I saying that right, Zeina? Beina, In Between was released in 2021 by the Poetry Box, and Zeina's poems are published or are forthcoming in Pleiades, Passager, Gyroscope, sorry, my text is very tiny, Pensive Journal, Streetlight, Mizna, Sakun Magazine, Barzaka, am I saying that right? Great.
Barzaka. Okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Making Levantine Cuisine, Tales from 6 Feet Apart, Bettering American Poetry, Making Mirrors, Writing by and for Refugees, Gaza Unsilenced, and others. She holds an MA in Arabic Literature from Georgetown and an MA in Sociology from George Mason, and we are thrilled to have her with us this evening. Thank you. Take it away.
I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. Good evening, everyone, and to share my poetry during the August Rush. So much gratitude to you, Courtney and Rachel, for making this possible, and for all you do for the community of writers in the Washington, D.C. area, and obviously from tonight, from many parts of the country. The Inner Loops website says that the reading series is the cornerstone of our community, transforming, quote, the written word into a shared experience through the act of reading aloud. I love that so much. I've been attending for several months now and can really attest to the fact that these programs are a vital part of the literary scene in our area. A big thanks also to the Ethelbert Miller, a literary activist in DC and a wonderful poet who's on the board of the Inner Loop. I have a handful of poems to share with you tonight on different topics. A couple are from the new chapbook, and the rest are poems I've written over the last few months. So I'll start with a short COVID poem that I wrote last year. It seemed appropriate. And this has an epigraph, and it comes from NBC News. Social distancing during COVID means no hugs. Hugging the tree. It was neither part of a protest nor a statement to the world. I simply put my arms around a tall oak and stood in embrace, our bodies juxtaposed. There was no swaying. Her trunk, solid and true, felt like an ancestor, a pillar thick with years. Her bark scratched my skin if I moved, so I stayed still. It was a time to be calm and reflect on our presence together, to look up to the sky and fathom the height of my partner, to inhale the earthy scent, to arc my grateful arms around this strong matriarch and whisper into the wood my wordless secret. I have not hugged anyone for months, my dear tree. My family is from Palestine, My parents became refugees during the war in 1948 when the state of Israel was established, and they fled for their lives and left everything behind. They first went to Syria and then to Lebanon, where I had my childhood. We immigrated to the US when I was 10 years old. Here's a poem about that experience for me. Leaving my childhood home. On our last day in Beirut, with my 10 years packed in a suitcase, my best friend asked for a keepsake. I found a little tin box to give her, emptied of lemon drops, that would hold memories of our childhood, us swinging in the dusty schoolyard, rooftop hide and seek, wispy sweet jasmine, kilos of summertime figs, king of falafels, tahini with sandwiches, our pastel autograph books. All those remembrances crammed in that box, tiny storytellers waiting to speak. Later, her family would uproot too, transplant like surly Palestinian weeds, pulled every few years. We all knew about this, even the kids. I never saw her again, but know that she also learned to travel lightly, hauling empty boxes, pulsing with kilos of memories. So I've lived in the United States since I was young, and now I have children of my own who were born here. I've always thought about how one negotiates different languages and cultures, and especially how do you transmit those parts of your identity to your children, to the next generation. So in this next poem, I have to mention that there are two words in Arabic in this poem. Asfar is the Arabic word for yellow, and akhdar, the Arabic word for green. A language for colors. Asfar, she would say, pointing at a yellow tulip. And the color of grass? Akhdar. My young daughter had mastered not only the colors, but also the throaty KH, two letters in English that equal one in Arabic. I would tell her it's the same sound as in khamse, khubz, sabanich, 5, bread, spinach, and my favorite name, Khalid, immortal. I once confessed to a friend wistfully that I would not name my son Khalid because Americans couldn't pronounce it. Now I wonder about such wisdom. Even my 8-year-old could constrict her throat muscles the right way to say Khalid, immortal like an ancient olive tree, a flame that never abates, a mother's love. This spring, I saw a patch of double hybrid tulips, asfar tinged with akhdar, and thought of my daughter's satisfied grin at learning those words, thousands of miles away from her grandparents' home in Palestine. Here we are, hybrid Americans, living between two languages and speaking in colors, splendid flowers in a distant field. Many years ago, I attended a conference about Arab American writers and Arab American literature. And at one of the workshops, we were told not to write about food. The argument is that, focusing on food diminishes other parts of our culture. It kind of reduces it to, hummus and pita bread. But I have to say I disagreed because I think that food is such an important contributor to the fabric of our society and our community. So I went home and wrote this poem. Before reading it, I just want to note that the Arabic pronunciation for baklava is baklawa. So I will read it, I'll pronounce it that way. At the workshop on ethnicity and identity. We are advised not to write anymore about tabbouleh and hummus, baba ganoush, lemony grape leaves stuffed with rice and meat. Our culture is larger than the life of the chickpea from sprout to table, or the time it takes to eat a bowl of minted yogurt, rolled cabbage with garlic cloves, stuffed baby squash. Mujaddara with caramelized onions is beyond the pale now. Let's not talk about eggplants and pine nuts or ground pistachios ornamenting baklawa in sweet syrup, orange blossom water in lemonade, cardamom infused coffee. And should we mention the special food served when a baby is born, a tooth appears, someone dies, the moon a thin crescent at the start of Ramadan, Easter's arrival. A baklawa backlash is unfolding, and I am starved for metaphors. I'm going to take things in a little bit of a different direction now. Watching my late mother age was a difficult thing for me. I'm sure, everybody feels this way. In my mom's case, I especially thought about what stories remain with a refugee decades after their dislocation. How do these memories influence their final years on Earth? So this is titled, A Refugee Grows Old. She is surprised by the pink cyclamen in the pot, examines the foreign petals, upswept as if reaching toward another place. Her own journey seems muted now, details as far away as her childhood in Palestine, where in one scenario, she would have lived in the same place until great-grandchildren played around the lemon tree that defined her family's house in scent and space. Where in the real scenario, she fled for her life with a husband and baby, in her pocket a key that rusted over the years. Her memories are like henna on a hand, splendid arabesques fading each day until gone. She has covered so many miles by boat, plane, car, on foot, measured by oceans and clouds, gas fumes, tattered flags left behind, driver's licenses, rental agreements, goodbyes to friends and family, a lifetime unanchored, cleaved. She continues to worry that someone is plotting to take away her home, while slowly hunching over a downswept, bent flower, weighed down by hallucinations. She knows some things never leave you, so you have to leave them yourself. Take small steps away, looking for some peace. I think because I grew up hearing and absorbing the Palestinian refugee narrative, I have a heightened sensitivity toward others who have to flee their homelands or who have lost their homes. We hear and read about such stories about displacement every day, especially people taking boats from Africa and the Middle East in the Mediterranean to escape war and famine, and many of them die at sea. And now we have the tragedy in Afghanistan unfolding before our eyes. So here is a poem titled, A Grammar for Fleeing. Hudud, the word for border, looms in her mind's vocabulary like a passive voice, a noun for longing. Maybe the undulating line runs in water or in sand, splays on the imagined cover of a passport, map for a new home. She has vowed to cross it, daughter on her hip, two legs doggedly moving apace, two legs suspended, bare. She plans to learn the other side, like a foreign language. First the stones as single utterances, then the houses and hills, sentences. The scenes will warm in the light of the sun. Now it is dark, and the little girl is ensconced in her arms, eyes closed, but a lulling breeze could spell betrayal if they aren't careful. She reaches between her breasts for the pendant inscribed with amal, hope, rubs it like a magic lamp. The din of conversation starts to rise as light gathers at the horizon, where the singular message of true East has grounded her since childhood. Lay low, look west, wait for the boat. She understands the grammar for fleeing, unspoken rules that decide how the journey will end, when words like harb, war, and jour, hunger, might ebb and not flow. Her toddler wakes asking for water as the sea responds with crashing waves. Those are hard poems to write and to read. Anyway, I'd like now to share a poem about my late father. It's titled, My Father's Hands. They were not large, but thick, fleshy workers in the garden, nursing eggplants and fennel, okra and chard, digging and tilling and weeding, making the soil an obliging host. Maybe that's what made his fingers rough in spots, or maybe it was a constant leafing through books, a loving lick and a flip-flap of the page in search of nuggets that would be turned over and over in his mind. After he died, I found bookmarks between pages, carefully pointing like tags next to seedlings in the earth. These are the plants I hoped for. These are the ideas that made me grow. So I'll pivot here and read my final poem, which is about a completely different subject. It's about relationships. It's a short poem called Clarification. When I said I wanted to sleep with you, what I meant was really that, to fall asleep with your body next to mine, arms and legs interlaced, your cheeks nestling in my hair as my eyelids flutter and thoughts of you turn inward like small animals drawn to a dark home. I would dream about us as if we were awake in our colorful world, a vivid aurora that is far away yet palpable like your graceful hands. And then when dreams start to mesh with wakefulness, I will want to open my eyes, contented to remember that sometimes I can escape into myself and come back to feel the suppleness of warm skin, inhaling, exhaling, to find you there after your own reverie and believe that you are still next to me. Thank you.
Zeina, that was, in one short word, stunning, but thank you so, so much.
Thank you, that means a lot to me, thank you.
It's beautiful. I'm trying to multitask. Next, here we go. Next in, oops, I opened a word. Next in fiction, Andrew Britannia.
Yeah, thank you for those poems. Those are really lovely. Okay. I will read just one piece of flash fiction here. It's a story called First Wife. Sometimes he texted with his dead wife, blue delight of words. He had her saved under a different name, Roger, an old college friend, in case his living wife ever searched his texts and got jealous. In truth, most of the texts wouldn't make his living wife jealous because his dead wife mostly texted hideous pictures. Have you seen these? She'd ask, then send him earthworms, millipedes, metatarsal and clavicle, things only the dead find interesting. It was a novelty, though, he had to admit, a thin reed of communication. Sometimes he'd catch his dead wife in a lucid moment, and they'd text about small things like their favorite burger place, how salty the fries were. She'd say, remember how if the wind was blowing a certain direction, we could practically taste it? Which river was that? Was it green or blue? Are rivers still blue? He'd remind her it was the ocean and blue-green, and then she'd be gone again, sometimes for days, thinking her dead thoughts, not remembering him at all. At first, her absences didn't bother him. He carried on with his days. But soon he found himself missing those odd texts, the little snippets of memory he thought had been severed by her death. When she texted next, he went for a walk in the park. Rain fell from a low sky, pattering leaves, petals reflecting the soles of his shoes in the clouds beyond, performing their dramas. They texted about a book they'd both loved, one where the narrator reminisces about an older lover she'd had when she was a teen. Do you think that was really love? She texted. I don't know. I sort of forget what I meant by that. He wanted to ask her if she still loved him. He didn't know what he'd do if she said that she did, what it would change. Did we read that book together? He asked. Yes, she answered, underneath blue covers. Your feet were always so warm. I loved your feet. The rain picked up, lashing the crowns of trees. The man watched from the pagoda, thinking about the blue covers, the way so many delicate shades were brought together in the threads. An idyllic scene of a farm, blue pigs, blue chickens, a blue river running through the blue background. The next time she texted, it was about an obscure pain she had in her right hip, which she noted didn't even exist anymore. It sounded terrible to be dead, but sometimes it was also terrible to be alive. Life was full of such conundrums, and the thing to do was just to keep living or being dead. Neither worked perfectly, but the key was persistence. Eventually, he caught her alert again, and they texted about a trip they'd taken to the Amalfi Coast when they were young and very much in love. They'd stayed in a small apartment on the cliffs, the blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea cupping the small boats in cities below. Do you remember the kittens, she asked, that small little one with brown patches on his eyes, who kept climbing onto the table and eating our eggs? I'd forgotten them all, he answered. They are here too. Really? Or maybe. I don't know. Maybe they aren't. Do you have any hydrangeas? I loved hydrangeas. He paused because this wasn't true, but maybe it was true of his dead wife. Maybe someone had put hydrangeas near her grave and she was turning them blue. What did he know? What he remembered was hiking the path of the gods, pausing every few hundred yards to marvel at the water, the white vertebrae of wake left by boats, and the way they'd stopped in the shade of an elm, thin stripes of a vineyard, impossibly green at the top of the cliffs. He lay there and thought about the trip, about how much he missed his life with her. Sometimes he found himself jealous of his still living wife, the way she paraded around with those corporeal hips. What's wrong, darling? She asked him tenderly, while he looked out the window at the birds hopping between vertices of branches. Nothing. I hate it when you sigh. She was too sweet for him. He wanted someone like his dead wife, someone who understood that he'd rather be in memory than the present moment. He walked the streets that afternoon, observing everyone with happy, tail-wagging dogs. Was he jealous of the dogs or the people with dogs? Hello, said his neighbor, companionably, trying to engage him in conversation. Hi, he said, shuffling past. Do you remember sex? He texted. Do you remember that time in the elevator? That little black dress you wore? The way you were so hungry to put our mouths on one another. Lately, it's all I can think of. The neighbor followed him, though, commenting on the weather. Not a lot of rain. Could use some. He texted her again, asking if she recalled how we'd always loved the curve of her, to look up at her eyes, such delight in the pleasure of her body. Luckily, the neighbor's dog paused to pee on an azalea, and the man made his escape. At home, his wife was making tea. She asked if he'd like Earl Grey or jasmine. Neither, he answered, and went upstairs to lie in his bed and wait for his dead wife to text back, to tell him she remembered everything. The time he'd first said he loved her on a walk through an oak-lined path, their summer hike through Archers, the vultures winging overhead, bits of sandstone carved by water, by wind, the way she laughed so uproariously the time they'd fought over an answer on Jeopardy, or the way she'd lain in the crook of his arm after sex, the fan stirring overhead. He waited and waited in bed, his phone silent, while the remaining light went from orange to blue, then into pure darkness. Thanks.
That was hilarious and amazing all at the same time. Pardon Courtney's dog squeaking in the background. Talk about multitasking. Okay, did that work?
No.
Yeah, it did work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, next in poetry, Chris Files.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Interloop for having me. I have 3 poems on mental illness and our different perspectives about it for you. The first is a poem specifically about multiple personality disorder and also the confusion and the anger that can come with it. Inconsistencies. Always a darkness in the dawn, you are a victim of yourself, living for the haunted flicker of flame, for the glow, the way the wax drips like soon to be frozen blood. You belong to heaven, you belong to hell. Make a halo with your fingers, you sleep and your body itches in its inconsistencies. Wake with the sun to find bloody sheets, skin beneath nails, awaiting its transformation into dust, as are you. Would you kill to make it through the night? Yes, because when the storm chases you underground with a smile, pulling at the edge of your upper lip, sneering, you just crash, crash, burn down there where no one else can go. Your yesterdays are calling, as always, shrieking that message you left behind, left to float away, corked in that bottle, now returned with the tide. And your left eye begins to twitch again. No fucking reason why. Then another night of the hunter and the hunted, one and the same. You belong to heaven. You belong to hell. Climb the inky silhouettes of tree branches, hands blackened, hunt, hide, shoot, be shot, scream in agony, scream in blissful wonder at the pain. You are ripped apart, so fall again, back where you belong. You belong to heaven. You belong to hell. Scratches head to toe, swollen eye, bloodied lip, broken arm, gunshot residue sticks to your hands, blackens the gaping, gushing hole in your chest where your heart once thought it was actually on your side. Gone now. Can't even rip it out. Again. Where? How? Why? Because the sky is always such a mess. Because you belong to heaven. Because you belong to hell. The second poem I'll read is about different ways we all think about mental illness, and it starts with a quote from the American comedian Groucho Marx. Perspective. Blessed are the cracked, for they shall let in the light. And shine we shall, through our reversed chasms, into the world of raised eyebrows and pretenders. Nothing quite like a lone tree that can still stand tall in the midst of monotony. We know it. We're all just symbolically crazy, like Mr. Rochester's wife, locked upstairs in her attic. So no reason to raise the alarm, because I say I saw the clouds eat the moon. They would have kissed, but then the wind blew. Yet still, you put up the chained link and barbed wire to boot. But know that whatever way you cage us, we can always imagine ourselves out, watching you through the windows of our own attics, and be warned that a flicker becomes flame, and flame becomes fire, and fire conflagration. Then maybe one day, you too will see the moon nearly kissed by the clouds, and the moonlight will be your own, shining out through reversed chasms. And the final poem I have for you tonight is about loving someone with mental illness and not having all the answers. A certain salvation. I've known you for a long time and told you long ago, you have to hold steady, keep to the road ahead. I know right now you are in the arms of the ocean with no place to rest your head. I know right now you are asking over and over again why the reflections still look the same from the other side of the water. I know right now the white waves are crashing above you. Your heaven is crashing, and I wish you wouldn't tumble with those waves. I want to say, don't go up or down, hold steady, keep to the road ahead. But I know you know right now that you'll break down up ahead if it's neither up nor down. I know you know right now that your heaven is above, that rising up to it, rising up to take the tumble over and over again is the only way to reach your stars, is the only way to keep from the darkest depths of this ocean. I know you know right now that holding steady is not an option, as it would lack the light in your eyes. You should know that I know this too. So tumble, tumble, tumble with the waves, because that, as we both know right now, is the only road to your salvation. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing those.
Okay. Next in nonfiction, Chris O'Shea. I'm getting the hang of this.
Yeah, you are. Very smooth. Hi, Chris.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me. And Chris, those were incredibly powerful poems. I'm going to read from my forthcoming memoir, Our Last Blue Moon, which was, it's about the death of my husband in 2015. And I want to read the part of the story, which is a scene describing the first night that we met at an artist retreat in California. And I arrived a couple of days before Alan. And so I was eating dinner with several of the other artists who were in residency there when Alan arrived. And we'd just been talking about him. So that began the next 25 years. As if on cue, a tall man, looking rather lost and bewildered, appeared through the sliding glass doors. He had a cumbersome bag draped over one shoulder and a large suitcase pulling at his other side as he awkwardly shoved through the door, stumbling, practically falling onto the dining room table. I wondered why he hadn't come to the front door instead. Alan Choops, am I in the right place? Several of those who were his friends rose up to greet him. I thought, Alan Choops. Now, where have I heard that name? He looked like one would imagine a writer or professor. Wire-rimmed glasses, curly cropped black hair just covering his neck, streaks of gray in his scruffy beard. I quickly noticed his skinny legs and cavernous rib cage. He wore jeans and a denim shirt, way too much denim. Alan lugged his bags down the hall to his room. When he returned, he sat in the empty chair directly across from me. Hi, I'm Chris O'Shea. I took a bite of apple crisp. Nice to meet you, Chris. He said it gently. And the way he said my name, what happened in my body? Which element had been ignited? Fire, water, air. I looked down at my plate. You're in trouble already, O'Shea, I said to myself. Better not look up again. We all stayed at the dinner table, keeping Alan company. For dessert, Alan requested a bowl of fresh fruit instead of the apple crisp. On a diet? I felt my mother's voice rise inside of me. Flirty and audacious, the way Southern women of her generation often substituted seduction for intellect. For health reasons, Alan responded rather curtly. Is that a Southern accent I detect, Chris? Why, yes, it is, Alan. I relished the sound of his name in my mouth. You missed the Elvis story, coming in so late and all. I launched into a nonstop monologue, how I had a full-time teaching position in Texas, how my students had mostly come from high school drill teams and could strut in perfect unison, how I had danced in London for 10 years, how each of my parents had been married 3 times, how I had been married only twice, and how I had divorced my first husband by following the advice in a book, popular at the time, on how to get your own divorce. Everyone at the table was laughing. Everyone except Alan, who just sat looking at me, Buddha-like. I had never seen eyes like his, small yet piercing, and blue, deep, deep blue, set under a shelf of shapely, almost comical eyebrows that looked as if they could dance off his face. His eyes appeared to be listening more than looking, as if the rhythms and cadences of speech became the music through which he could see into anything and everything. Someone put on a country western song. A few of us began shuffling around the kitchen floor. I decided to teach Alan the Texas two-step. As I demonstrated the steps, it quickly became obvious that Alan was hopeless. Under the guise of trying to show off my teaching skills, but really just wanting to grab him, I placed my hands on his narrow hips and attempted to steer him in the proper directions. He was a good sport, perhaps even enjoying my attention, but I wondered if I had gone too far. That is, until the music suddenly switched to Ray Charles. Alan exploded with movement. His hips gyrated, his voice belted out, "Tell your mama, tell your pa, I'm gonna send you back to Arkansas." He jumped up and down like a wild man. He swung his arms all over the place, shaking his head and singing out the words. Alan, the professor, twisted down to the floor, then both of us were spinning on our butts. He belted out the lyrics perfectly, even as he pushed himself off the floor, grabbed my hands and swooped me up. Where did he get such strength? As we jitterbugged around the floor, twirling and twirling, lifting my arms up and over, dipping me, my head almost touching the floor, singing about loving all night long, he pulled me up against his chest and held me for an instant. As I tried to anticipate what he would do next, he let go and bebopped into the living room, where he paused behind a large fluffy sofa. Then he somersaulted over it like a diver splashing headfirst into water. As the music ended, Alan landed triumphantly on both feet and boogied himself back into the kitchen, all to a huge burst of applause. Thanks.
Wow, that is such a vivid, wonderful portrait.
Amazing.
So good. Thank you, Chris.
Not always how you think of Alan Shoes, huh?
It's good to have some inside info here.
I can tell you a lot more. In the memoir.
That's right.
Speaking of which, I did want to mention,
yes.
I forgot to mention at the beginning, but this is the zone of shamelessly promoting yourself. So everyone put your websites or where we can buy your book into the chat. And the whole point of the interloop and the readings is to give people a taste, like Chris just did, and make us want more. So pursue those authors that you love in the reading and buy their books and support them, and everyone promote yourself in the chat. Now Courtney's working on breakout rooms as I talk, and we're going to take a 10-minute intermission. We're going to come back with 6 more amazing readers. During intermission, you can chat with the people in your breakout room, you can get drinks, you can go to the bathroom, do whatever you feel like doing. Very low key, low pressure.
Low pressure.
Millennial, officially. And we'll see you back here at exactly 8:32.
8:32.
Set your watch.
Okay.
And go.
All right. Okay. I think we are all well met again. I hope those of you who joined participated in the virtual breakout rooms. And I'm trying to multitask again. But yeah, we're going to get started back up with a second half. And Rach, do you want to talk a little bit about Author's Corner before we do?
Yeah, our newest project / program is called Author's Corner, in which we spotlight a local author once a month who has recently published a book from a small to medium-sized press. And we spotlight that author through our monthly reading series, as well as on our website with author interviews, on our podcast. And that person also does a guest post with Washington Independent Review of Books. And they have a physical corner at Potter's House with their book featured for sale, as well as our Eat, Drink, Read program. Which is where we partnered with local restaurants to put a little excerpt from the book in takeout and menu orders to sort of spread the word about the book via restaurants. So those are Shaw's Tavern, Revelers Hour, and Pie Shop DC. So if you order takeout or even eat in at those restaurants, you'll see a little excerpt from our author of the month. And yeah, we're super excited to feature this month's author, Zak Salih, whose book, Let's Get Back to the Party, is our August feature.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for highlighting me this month, but also for inviting me to read. It's always just so incredibly impressive to just hear so much great work coming from so many writers who are right in my backyard. So thank you. I'm going to read just maybe 3 or 4 pages from the novel. So the novel is told in 2 voices that are each very distinct. And so the voice that I'm going to read from you now is from a character named Sebastian Mote. He is a high school art history and English teacher, and the architecture of his narrative is one of kind of melancholy and memory. So there's not much to know about this chapter other than this is Sebastian going to the National Gallery of Art. And there's there are a couple passages, a reference to a painting, which is the Singleton Copley painting, Watson and the Shark. And the character named Oscar that's mentioned in this is the other narrative voice, and is an estranged childhood friend. Every time I went to the National Gallery of Art, I thought of the shark with the human face, rising from the depths, monstrous, jaws outlined with lips, eyes dotted with pupils, teeth like a greedy grin, the horn nostrils, the feathery fins, the invention of someone who'd probably never seen a shark, who'd chosen instead to cobble a demon from fantasy and conjecture. The film screening wasn't until 1 that afternoon, but I arrived several hours early anyway. It was Sunday, and I wanted time to stroll through the familiar galleries as if wandering through a sacred space. I wanted time to myself before the halls grew thick with visitors trying to take the right photographs, trying to see without seeing every piece of marble and bronze and metal, every slash of oil and charcoal and pen. I walked and thought of the times I'd come here with my parents and of all the times we brought Oscar with us. We'd walk the National Mall and see whatever struck our fancy that day. Brontosaur femurs and tyrannosaur teeth. The timeline of the universe with its beguiling portrait of early man staring out from the depths of the Paleolithic era. The lunar landers like candy swaddled in foil wrappers. The pinned bugs proudly displaying their glassy wings and limbs. The posters and banners proud advocating for the rights of blacks, of women, of don't stare at it too long, Sebastian, homosexuals. But the National Gallery of Art was my favorite. Even if we were headed somewhere else, I'd beg my parents, beg Oscar to at least walk through it on the way. Oscar hated these diversions. Over time, it became obvious just how bored he was. Rarely did he want to stop and linger. Didn't he remember this was where we'd first met? We were on hallowed ground. How could he not care? But instead of looking at the paintings and sculptures with me, Oscar would look at the other kids, the tourists, the docents leading tiny tours up grand staircases, and wait impatiently for his spaceships and saber-toothed cats. There's a young man, Copley's Brooke Watson, pale hair swept back by water, in danger of catching on sharp teeth. Body startlingly white, reclined in a classical pose belying the danger of his predicament. A nude in the American Puritan style, left leg cocked to cover the subject's modesty, undoubtedly shrunken in fear of the mouth rushing toward it. I used to take dates with me to the National Gallery. We'd meet always inside the rotunda, around the fountain with its eruption of greenery, its gleeful statue of Mercury. We'd walk for an hour or so, and empowered by my love of this space, I'd lead the conversation. I'd point out things I'd learned about various pieces over the years. I'd inquire, teacher-like, about what struck my dates as beautiful, as ugly. I found it all arousing. Not the tiny Greco-Roman penises or the swell of romantic buttocks, so much as the charged sexuality of the space itself, the intimacy of being in hushed rooms that required us to speak into the hollows of each other's necks, the occasional brush of hand against hand as we moved around a sculpture or through a small crowd. The last man I brought here was Jake, to see a show of Edvard Munch prints in the East Wing. We spent the afternoon walking through the galleries, complaining about the perils of serial dating, snickering at awkward tourists, making mock scream faces at one another. Once, Jake leaned in and caught me on the lips mid-scream. At the end of the evening, I was invited up to Jake's apartment. If you're lucky, he'd said over our second glass of wine, I'll show you my O face. He'd slapped his hands to his cheeks, unhinged his jaw, rolled his eyes up in his head. Later, I discovered Jake's O face was nothing like a Nordic scream. It was a hiss of pleasure through gritted teeth, a thankful release, like air let out of a bicycle tire. It was a sound I'd come to memorize, a sound I was starting to forget. The crewmates on the rescue boat stand out against the haze of the Havana harbor. More than the two men leaning over the side, reaching, it seems, for Watson's nipple. More than the man with wind-whipped hair holding them back. More even than the St. Michael figure on the boat's prow, harpoon at the ready, is, to me, the most important face in the entire tableau, the ginger-haired rower. He stares down from between the warrior's breeches, bored and half awake, as if thinking, Christ, Watson, I can't believe we have to save your ass again. I took a coffee from the cafeteria and sat outside the front steps of the museum, looking out on the lawn pockmarked with people and, beyond it, the Washington Monument. Recalling how Oscar always likened it to a robot, I sent him a last-minute text, told him where I was and what I was looking at. I wasn't expecting anything, had long given up on reconnecting. Perhaps it was just habit, or maybe I was a masochist. Maybe I just wanted him to know I still existed out there in the world. I put my phone away and thought of the day we'd joined my father on a research trip to the National Archives, a day when instead of lawn on the ground in front of the ground in front of us had been covered with massive patchworks of color around which people stood and looked down, hands behind backs or tucked into the crooks of folded arms. As we got closer, the patches revealed themselves in greater detail. Letters, words, symbols, shapes, numbers. The sky free of clouds, the great work in front of us appeared without blemish, its entirety made brilliant in the sunlight. We crossed Constitution Avenue, my father leading the way, and into the alleys of this massive grid. I caught fragments as we passed, rainbows, hearts, crosses, Christmas trees, stars and silhouettes, flowers and clenched fists, names. Hank Moyer, Bill Wolfe, Michael Arroyo, Lee Peters murdered by AIDS in 1992, Michael K. Scott Henry, Rob Burkle, Pedro Zamora, Mother. A man in one of the white plastic alleys sobbed like an animal. Someone at the far end of the mall screamed into a bullhorn. A mother hissed at her kids not to skip, to show respect for the dead. I recalled feeling in the presence of something serious that day, something terrifying, something sacred, even if I had no idea at the time why it should matter to someone like me. I recalled how eager Oscar was to keep moving, how an untied shoelace trailed behind him like a pale garden snake. I finished these thoughts, finished my coffee, then went back inside the museum to flip through expensive catalogs in the bookstore. The Swimming Hole, Thomas Eakins, 1884 to 1885. Here, my father says, and hands me a paperback copy of the complete poems by Walt Whitman. He takes the Xerox pages from my hands. You might find other poems in there you like too. My 12th grade English class is reading Song of Myself. It's beautiful, I think, when my teacher reads passages in class. I dwell repeatedly on these lines. An unseen hand also passed over their bodies. It descended tremblingly from their temples and ribs. It's a little gay, the boy in the next row says. Let's not use that word, my teacher says, unaware, or perhaps not, that many of us use this word to describe him outside of class. But yes, Walt Whitman was a homosexual. A fact made all the more obvious by the front cover of the Penguin Classics edition my father gives me. I wonder, is this a trick? Does my father want to see how I react to these two boys on their slab of rock, one in dramatic contrapposto, the other sitting up on his side, hand raised, head turned, unable to look directly at the buttocks just within reach? I hold onto the paperback long after our class's poetry unit ends, put it on my bookshelf next to the children's encyclopedia I haven't opened in years. In my room at night, I take the book down, foregoing the poetry in favor of the cover, the limber, perfectly proportioned body I want to hold, to slide along like a wet rock. Periodically, I lie face down on my bed, chin hanging over the edge, the book lying on the floor a foot below me, and grind myself into the mattress as if it were that same soft body. Afterward, I linger. I imagine it's not the tired twin mattress I'm dozing against, sheets crowded with the thunderheads of old cum stains, springs exhausted from years of constant frottage. Instead, it's the standing boy's sun-warmed body. While others cavort in the stream, the boy and I are alone with one another. This, I tell Jake years later, was when I first fell in love with another guy. Wait, I say, I take it back. There was someone before that. Thank you.
Brilliant, Zach. Thank you so much. And if you liked Sebastian's voice, you'll also love Oscar. Sebastian's very reflective and Oscar's very in the moment. You can buy Zach's book, Let's Get Back to the Party, at Potter's House. And I put a link to the page with all of our interviews and a link to buy the book through our website. Thanks, Zach. Okay, next in poetry, Xavier Boon.
Hi, doing well. I currently have about 5 or 6 poems right now. This first one I want to read does come with a trigger warning. It does speak on gun and sort of gang violence. Yeah. The news says they killed a baby today. I guess you can't have a real war without casualties. I mean, what's the war without the Reaper? Without angels that were born to die? Without these little American soldiers? Too young to claim any team? Too young to have to choose to be a warrior? To choose to serve the same streets that took away his father and her mother? Empty bottles by that lamppost, teddy bears hung on that tree. Oh, what strange fruit. These are memories for the fallen. Whether they were aware of the conflict does not matter. A bullet has no name even when the eye does. You know, this is the horror of war. When you see so much bloodshed, you stop wondering where it's flowing from. These alleys who commit sin and wash it away with the blood of people like you. The streets ain't nothing but Stockholm syndrome. Nothing but brainwashed soldiers, but veterans smoking away their demons. Though I did not carry a flag through the trenches, I have heard the stories. I have seen a battlefield after the last round. And I know that this is not a hill worth dying on. That's the first poem. The second poem is more lighthearted. It's sort of a love poem. So I'm gonna read that for you guys to get us out of a bad mood. I heard somewhere a woman's kiss tastes like New York City. But nah, I bet yours tastes like honey, like roses, like the last slice of pizza, like cartoons and cereal on Saturday mornings. I bet your hugs feel like something familiar, like home, like hot chocolate in the winter, warm and healing. I hope that if I take your hand, it will melt into mine like Hershey's in the summer. So what do I call you now that you're a superhero? How about super blank? Yeah, you're right, that's pretty lame. Forget it, we'll figure it out later. How did you get your powers? Like the one where you make me smile when your name pops up on my phone. How did you put these butterflies in my stomach from miles away? Where'd you even get them from? You know what? It's not even important. If you can read minds, do you know if my thoughts ever get jealous of their siblings that go on and become conversations between us? Is a costume as beautiful as you? I bet it is. What's your catchphrase? I hope it's something cool like never give up or have no fear, blank is here? Or is it, I know I'm right, or something else you tell me all the time? I don't know. All I know is I can't wait to fall from a high building so we can meet once you save me. Maybe then I'll get all my answers. And that's that poem. On to number 3. His third poem was written a few months after the second one, because, you know, things happen. Today, they call me flame, call me destructive, see their burns and call me dangerous, call me responsible. Tomorrow, they may call me sea, call me cold, call me unforgiving, see their sunken ships and call me destroyer, call me responsible. Truth is, I'm everything they think me to be. I am a fire trying to make peace of all the ashes in its wake. I'm an ocean, accepting all the wreckage in its depths. That's the end of that poem. This next poem was written because I also have to recognize that I have to take responsibility, not just in my relationships, but in everything else. This is a very short poem, 2 lines. I think I paint myself with too many red capes and not enough red hands. I push blame onto others like hustlers push weight just so it will not rest on my shoulders anymore. Quick little poem right there. This next one is about writer's block. I'm sure everyone has dealt with that at some point in time. Why do you look at me with that same blank stare? Like I owe you anything, as if your emptiness is my fault. Don't you know it's hard to turn anything into a work of art when you're trying to chisel away your own statue? Another short poem. This one is a longer poem. It's about how I love to read and how I love to write. You know, I've never read Peter Pan. There's a lot of books I've never read, but there are a lot that I have. I have explored many worlds with a youthful vigor. I have fought in wars, mystified crowds, and lived many lives through pages. So when my mom says, I never see you reading anymore, I realized a piece of me was lost. Somewhere along the line, that chapter ended, and I didn't open the book again. Don't you know lost boys don't live forever? I think many times I write out of guilt. If 10-year-old Xavier heard me say I have to get back into the habit of reading, he'd probably cry. Yeah, he'd definitely cry. You see, I create worlds so that he can run and jump and play and rule like a king. I built him kingdoms. The kid in me was never picky, but certain things had to be perfect. My castles are not. They are crooked and bent and crumbling and held together by duct tape and broken nails. I was never much of an architect in the first place. But they still house me, still keep the rain off my head and the wind off my back. From afar, I watch him play and sit upon his broken throne, and I know I can't keep him satisfied forever. Even so, at least the walls keep him out the cold. At least the lost boy has a home. Thank you. Quick promo. You can find all those books, not books, all those poems and more in my my second book. Hold up, I have to turn on the brightness a little bit. I apologize. I'm sorry. Still not bright enough, but hey, it's called The Things We Don't Become. It's available on Amazon for $7.99. I'll put the link in the bio. You guys can check it out. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for all the great art I've got the pleasure to listen to today.
Thank you so much, Xavier. It's so great to hear the range of voices there. More speaking in the background.
Always on cue.
Okay, next in fiction is Hannah Grieco.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. This is a short story called Maybe that came out just a couple weeks ago in Fictive Dream. Once in a blue moon, Nissa remembers how she felt when she was 15, and Jimmy back then, grabbed her hand and dragged her behind him as he ran, darting between the houses and the mansion part of town. Jimmy's grip was so firm, a man's grip. She'd think about it at night in her bed, his hands twice the size of hers, even then. They ran fast, breathing hard until her muscles cramped, and he pulled her behind some mom's SUV plastered with Honor Society bumper stickers. The party was at a cheerleader's house, a girl neither of them had ever spoken to, and the cops came and everyone took off, and he'd crouched down behind that car and kissed her for the first time, the taste of Coors Light on the inside of his lower lip as he sucked her tongue into his mouth. Now, when James reaches for her and she doesn't turn away, because it's her birthday and she's had 3 glasses of champagne, or because he got a raise and a good wife celebrates these things, when that happens, his hands are soft. This morning, Nissa sneaks out of bed at 4 o'clock, out into the hall, past the silent second bedroom, down the stairs. She sneaks like she used to sneak when Jimmy picked her up out front in the dark and drove them to Gravelly Point to watch the airplanes take off as the sun rose. They laid together in the grass. He wrapped her in a thick, sour-smelling quilt from his dad's truck so she wouldn't get cold. He kissed the side of her neck over and over to make her shiver anyway. My burrito, he mouthed against her. Maybe I'll get a breakfast burrito, she thinks as she passes the kitchen, no longer sneaking as she opens the door to the hall closet and grabs a sweatshirt. The navy and orange University of Virginia hoodie their son left behind when he decided to go to Los Angeles instead, when James told him, "School or nothing, kiddo, you'll be cut off." She pulls it on, stops halfway with her arms above her head and inhales. She hasn't smelled her son in 7 months, but she presses her face into the soft fleece and wishes, then pulls it on all the way and smooths her ponytail. She takes the keys to James' red Porsche Targa off the hook. His midlife crisis, she mean jokes at parties, but really she's the one who loves to drive it. She loves the round knob of the stick in her palm, loves to shift late to hear the engine grind. Maybe I'll go all the way to the beach, she thinks, to that burrito place by the boardwalk. She could get there by 7, before James even woke up and noticed she and his car were missing. She drives to IHOP instead. But yesterday she got up early like this and didn't even make it out of the driveway. Maybe tomorrow she'll drive past IHOP and get on Route 50. Maybe by Friday, she'll get all the way across the bridge and park at the closed oyster bar on the bay, walk down to the rocky water's edge and watch the seagulls dive. It'll almost smell like the ocean, almost feel like the ocean when she takes off her shoes, rolls up her jeans and steps into the freezing water up to her ankles. Maybe it'll be close enough. Maybe, baby, Jimmy used to say. Today, she decides on blueberry pancakes and then comes straight home, goes upstairs instead of down to her office, lays next to her husband and watches him sleep. His legs jerk like he stepped on something sharp, and she runs her fingers down his arms to his hands, squeezes them gently, then tucks them back into his chest, pulls the blanket up and wraps it around him tightly. She lays there for an hour, softly tracing the muscles of his forehead as they tighten and loosen, his eyes speeding back and forth beneath his eyelids as if every dream is him dragging her between houses and cars as kids, looking for a place to hide. Or maybe he's chasing her, maybe begging her to come home, to forgive him. Maybe, baby. Last night at dinner, he told her that he dreams about her every night, about the first time they fucked, wrapped in that quilt as the airplanes flew right above them, about eating ceviche in a converted convent in Puerto Rico on their honeymoon, about the second home he wants to buy her on the bay now that they have extra money on hand, tuition and textbooks, a fading memory, so she can look at the water every morning, he said. She falls back asleep as the sun starts to rise, but she dreams about driving, about the road ahead of her, about the sky, huge and empty, about the floor and seat of the Targa shaking as she pushes third gear until it screams, shifts into fourth and jerks forward, a straight line out of the city and west until she sees farms and corn and mountains, and finally the bigger, deeper Pacific. A breakfast burrito with her son on the beach. And then who knows where she'll go. Thank you.
Such a mesmerizing reading voice, Hannah. Thank you. Okay, next in poetry, Ellen Prentice Campbell and Spot.
Thanks. I love this night. I love this cabaret of all this variety. And I'm actually fiction. I'm a figment of your imagination. And I'm going to read to you two super brief passages from my novel that came out in May. It's called Frida's Song. The first voice you'll hear is that of Nick. He's 16. The sign for the pedestrian bridge across the train tracks was all lit up. The Peace Bridge, winner of the naming contest at school. The girl who thought it up stood near him in chorus, pale but pretty. In a way, she was right. Crossing over from East to West Rockville was kind of like going over the Berlin Wall or the Rio Grande. One night, his mom was driving him to basketball practice in the community center over here, and a cop stopped her. He was too little back then to know why. The cop thought she was shopping for crack. That would be the day, her shopping for crack. The bridge had a cage of wire, but someone with an assault rifle could do serious damage from up here. Like the sniper when he was in 4th grade, cruising around in an old green car, shooting people at gas stations, even a kid in a school parking lot. She drove him to school till they caught the man. She made him wear his seatbelt and sit on the seat, even though a bullet could come right in and he would have been safer hiding on the floor. Turned out the sniper had a kid with him, locked in the trunk, who did some of the shooting. He was in jail now too, for life. The guy wasn't his father. The bridge steps had no backs, like the cellar stairs at his grandparents' house, their old house now. The kind of stairs you could slip through. Don't believe everything you think, Ma told him. But look at the people who got their feet trapped by shoelaces on Metro and had to have their legs amputated. Things happen. So that's Nick. There are 3 voices that tell the story in Frida's song. And Frida is Frida Fromm-Reichmann. Frida was a psychiatrist who came from Hitler's Germany in 1935. And she came to Rockville and worked and lived for the rest of her life until she died in 57 at the Chestnut Lodge in Rockville. The story takes place in a cottage that was built on the grounds of the psychiatric hospital specifically for Frida to keep her there because she was such a valuable commodity practicing at the hospital. The book is primarily told during the year of 2009. Frida's voice speaks through the pages of a diary that Nick's mom finds in the cottage. So here's Frida. It's November 1938. She's coming downstairs for breakfast with her friend Gertrude, another German Jewish psychiatrist who works at the lodge and lives with Frida. I come downstairs, enjoying the smell of eggs and toast and coffee. My spaniel, Muni, leads me to the front door, eager to play fetch with the paper. He gums it up with his soft spaniel mouth and brings it to Gertrude. She rewards him with a bite of toast. I open the paper. Nietzsche says, "The man who does not lose his mind over certain things has no mind to lose." Gertrude, my hands tremble. I must tell her. I cannot protect her. A young German Jew exiled in Paris has killed a German official. All through Germany and Austria, they are wreaking havoc on Jewish businesses, smashing windows, stealing and burning merchandise, burning synagogues and schools. A surgeon I know in Munich, arrested for the crime of being Jewish. We hold each other. The phone rings. I do not answer. Morning light glints on the silver coffee pot I purchased, filling out my life again with domestic objects, deluded into believing in the security of belongings. The thick raspberry jam shines like a dark jewel, like clotted blood in the crystal dish. Crystal, crystal knocked, the paper calls it, the night of shattered glass. And that's a bit of Frida. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to everyone. And my website's in the chat and my books are at Politics in Prose, and I'll be reading at Politics in Prose September 12th. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful and such an interesting history. Okay, next in poetry, Anne Hanakowitz.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for this opportunity. If you look at my bio in the program, you'll notice that I have pronunciation guide for my name and also for one of the poets I recently translated, because I thought that my bio
was my bad,
read out loud rather than read. So that's fun. But now everybody really knows how to pronounce my name. So I would like to read 3 poems that started through April poetry writing practice that one of my dear friends, poet Matilda Young, started, and it's thanks to her that I've gotten back into writing poetry and that I'm here today. So big shout out to Matilda, and that's all for that introduction. So Matilda is great. My first poem is called Residents of Greenwood Cemetery. I wrote it when I visited Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn in April. And if you know a little bit of the history, there's the highest hill in Brooklyn is actually in the cemetery, and there was a battle, a Revolutionary War battle there. I don't think it really went very well for our side, but you know, lose the battle, win the war kind of thing. Anyway. Out of the spire of the entrance gate grows a beard of twigs, ever mended and tunneled into by bright green parrots. Outflowering of fat white blossoms keeping watch over the bay, heading off the assault of power grid and highway. On the highest of the ample hills grow wild violet, mugwort, plantain, and dandelion, all edible, but I don't dare disturb a grave for them. By the obelisk of New York men sacrificed in the Civil War, I stand as still as life allows so as not to scare off the catbird, who stays a while and hops almost to my toes, then, as if jolted awake, sees what I am and flaps off to mock me from the roof of the mausoleum. At the feet of the stone dogs guarding Captain C.A. Matheson and Eliza his wife, a bundle of sticks to keep them busy for eternity. The next poem is called Arrow Dog. Arrow Dog points us around in a giant circle. Circle Dog is more into ellipses these days. Puppy shoots out in all directions. Cat takes no prisoners. And my last poem is called Cup. Drinking from the sieve of my hands, furtive slurps from the faucet. A humid evening holding me close, mosquitoes cupping my neck. A cup of mint torn from the pot outside, a plate of fruit and a glass of milk. Milky was the night, a cupful of light spilling down our faces. Staring into the cups of your eyes, held close, swimming in the heart. Thank you.
Wonderful. Sorry, multitasking again. Thank you so much, Anne. That was beautiful. Okay, next in nonfiction. Uh-oh.
Hang on, I just saw it.
There he is. Edward Belfar. Belfar?
Yes, Belfar. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me tonight, and thank you for letting me be a part of this, and thanks to all the readers who've gone to hear some wonderful stuff tonight. I'm going to read as an essay that was recently published in Schuylkill Valley Journal, and it's about my father, and it's called Pages of Gold. The photograph, black and white, 3 inches by 5, slightly faded or a touch overexposed, captures my father rowing. With his lean upper body, his dark eyes staring directly at the camera, his wind-tussled, wavy black hair, and a cigarette dangling from his lips, Bogart style, he has a rakish, bad boy look. The picture lacks a date stamp, and the background, some trees, a sliver of lake, an empty white sky, reveals little about the location. Still, I know who took the photograph and approximately when. The envelope in which I found it just after my father died also contained a letter dated August 1942 from a woman I will call Ellen Wasserman. Eventually, I would find several more of her missives. The two maintained a correspondence and more for at least a couple of years until late 1944. The letters went to a Washington, D.C. address where my father lived for a time while grinding lenses for a defense contractor and waiting on his inevitable conscription. Ellen, originally from Holyoke, Massachusetts, was a nursing student in New York City, where the two had likely met before my father embarked upon his Washington sojourn. Owing to the geographical separation and perhaps, though left unstated, the necessity for a young single woman of that era to guard her reputation, in-person meetings seem to have been infrequent. In November of 1942, however, in the most risque line in all the correspondence, Ellen refers to a remark my father had made that her kisses were delicious. Her sly sense of humor reminds me of his own. A January 1943 letter starts, "Words written in diamond ink on pages of gold can hardly express my rapturous delight upon receiving your letter. How's that for a beginning?" Over time, however, her correspondence takes on a less whimsical tone. She complains of overwork and fatigue, asks repeatedly about when he will have vacation, voices frustration at his apparent evasiveness on the subject, and chides him for his often belated and terse replies to her letters. In July of 1943, she writes that she cries herself to sleep every night and muses about returning to Holyoke after finishing her studies. In December of 1944, she alludes to a misunderstanding stemming from a comment of hers in a previous letter concerning his draft status, apparently a sensitive topic for him, as his number would not come up until the last months of the war, and he would never see combat. After first assuring him that she had meant no offense, did not doubt his courage, and hoped that he would not have to go to war anyway, she lets her exasperation show. Harry, it's got to the point where I don't know what to write for fear you'll take it the wrong way. Had we ever met, we could have commiserated. Though he would mellow some in his later years, my father would remain throughout his life a prickly sort, jealous of his dignity, quick to perceive a slight, intended or not. That letter of December 1944 is, perhaps not surprisingly, the last of the bunch. Whether or not my father harbored any regrets about Ellen Wasserman, I do not know. He never referred to her even obliquely in my or my siblings' hearing, and we knew nothing of her existence during his lifetime. Why then did he keep the letters and that photograph taken on the lake from World War II to the end of his life, a period that included his 52-year marriage to my mother? Perhaps the items held less meaning for him as reminders of Ellen specifically than of a time when, the shadow of the draft notwithstanding, all of life lay open before him, and by angling his cigarette just so, he could make a young woman, and perhaps even himself for a moment or two, believe that he was cut from the same rugged cloth as Sam Spade or Rick Blaine. Regardless, I consider myself fortunate to have found them. I also feel grateful to Ellen Wasserman for the wit, frankness, and acuity of perception that afforded me a glimpse into both her life and that of a young man named Harry Belfar, liberated at last from the narrow role to which I'd always consigned him, that of my father. I hope that for her there did come a time of delights that only words written in diamond ink on pages of gold could have expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Those moments of discovery are certainly jarring and don't come often. So thank you for sharing. I don't know. Oh, thanks. So I just want to give one more round of applause for all of our readers tonight. If everyone wants to unmute and clap, that would be awesome. Celebrate all of you. A really, really special thanks to Zeina. It was so touching, and thank you for showing up all these many months and sharing in the community with us. It's been wonderful to see and get to know your face, even if it's not in person. And Zach, everyone be on the lookout for his books and everyone's books and stories here tonight. Again, share them. You can also share them in the Facebook page of the event if you'd like, or shoot us a note, and we're happy to share things on social media for you. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
The next event is on September 21st, is it?
Yes, September 21st. Our featured reader will be Cutter Wood, who is at GW this year for the, I think he's doing the Jenny McKean Award. No, I don't know. I forget.
He's someone special.
Everyone is someone special.
Yeah, and we're probably going to keep to virtual until this whole COVID thing shakes out a little more. But it's so great to see you all, even if it is virtual. It's such a lovely recharge of our souls to get these doses of literature and to share in the joy of being writers together. So thank you all for coming, and we will see you all next month.
Our residents will also be reading, so you'll get to hear about their summers, which is cool.
So cool.
Have a great night. We'll see you again.
Thanks so much.
Hey, and shout out to Kira, our amazing outreach coordinator, for sharing this evening with the world.